Live.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Roger Hartley. I serve as Dean of the College of Public Affairs at the University of Baltimore. And Dr. Ann Cotton and I, and she will introduce herself in a moment, wanted to offer you a warm welcome to the final guest and the final Voices of Public Service program that we have on for this semester. As you know, a little bit about the series. We started this a couple years ago as an opportunity for our students specifically to hear from public leaders, to have the opportunity to engage with public leaders, but also really to hear about their career, how they got to where they were, what challenges and opportunities they took along the way, what made becoming a public servant appear on their radar and when. It's been really marvelous. And I have to say today, we're just absolutely thrilled and delighted to have with us Senator J.B. Jennings, who represents a portion of Baltimore County. And I know I'm probably forgetting other portions, is also an alum of the University of Baltimore, our School of Law. And I also want to say a special thank you, Senator, who has also come to speak to our students in the past and has done a lot to help the University of Baltimore. I really appreciate that you appeared last year, for instance, for our annual day in Annapolis, and to our students, we're planning that for next spring again as well. I want to turn it over to Ann Cotton for a few words as well.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ann Cotton, Executive Director, the Schaefer Center for Public Policy here in the College of Public Affairs. We're thrilled to have Senator Jennings here with us today to talk about his public service career. Before we get started, I want to say just a couple words about the Schaefer Center. We're the Applied Research and Public Service Division of the College of Public Affairs. We offer research services to public, government, and nonprofit organizations. In addition to that, we offer the Maryland Certified Public Manager Program for state, local, and nonprofit managers. And we have our Next Gen Leaders for Public Service program, where we're providing internships for University of Baltimore students to work in government and nonprofit organizations throughout the state. We just had a great article about that come out in our University of Baltimore magazine yesterday. So as we go through, I'll put a link to that in the chat. So any students that are interested in internships, you can learn more about the program. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dean Hartley for our first question.
Thanks so much, Ann. Really appreciate it. Senator, again, welcome. First question, how did you get your start in public service?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. It's an honor to come back, especially to my alma mater at UB. Just to correct the record, I was actually the business schools where I graduated, not the law school.
Apologies to the Merrick School.
No. Hey, I wish I would have gone to law school. Part of me wishes, but I'm glad that I like business a little more. So how did I get started in public office? Good question. So Bob Ehrlich had just gotten elected to Congress, and I was at college I was actually transferring into UB, and he had just been elected congressman. And I had met him at a function, always liked politics, started talking to him, and he offered me an internship. And that's how I started. I would leave school in the afternoons. I'd go to the office and work for about 3 hours. They had a district office up in Lutherville, and I would work, I think it was Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is the schedule I kept, where I'd get there at about 3 in the afternoon. I would work till 7 because they wanted to keep the office open after hours so people could stop by. And that's kind of how it started. I did 6 months as an intern. And then they said, hey, would you mind staying? We can pay you a little extra. So I stayed kind of as a staffer. Then I went into his congressional reelection campaign. And then after that, he hired me full time working for him on Capitol Hill. The unique thing was, and why UB actually worked out was, so I lived up in northern Baltimore County in the Jacksonville, Phoenix area. He lived over in Timonium. And I was still going to school. I was a senior at the time. And I would meet him down at UB in the morning, usually about 7:30. I would park at the Biddle Street garage, and I'd be standing down there on the corner. There was a place called Jay's. I don't know if it's still around anymore.
Yep.
It was a bar and deli. I'd always go buy him a coffee and get myself, usually a hot chocolate and donuts for us. And then he'd pull up. I'd get in the car. He'd get in the passenger seat, and I'd drive him to DC and spent the whole day, doing work there. But anytime he needed to be driven around DC area for various meetings, I was his driver. And then usually about 4:30, I would walk from the congressional office over to Union Station, get the train, and take the train to Penn Station, get off at Penn Station, walk across the street to UB, and go to night school. So that was my senior year of college at UB and how I did it. But that's how I started working for him for 4 years, or 2 years. Once I graduated, got out of politics, went in the business world for a while, had a feed mill, farm operation store, farm supply store. And I did that for about 6 years. And then I got the itch to get back into politics. And that's when I decided to run for the House of Delegates.
Thanks so much. Got a follow-up for you, but I wanted to first start by saying that you just described the traditional UB experience really quite well. And also, what's really terrific about our campus with the centrality of it in the middle of the city, the opportunity to hop on the train and go to Washington and everything else. It was really nice to hear. But we also learned another thing about you in your bio, and this is also public service, of course. You spent some time as a volunteer firefighter and maybe still do. How did that fit in, and what have you learned from that in your work as a public servant?
So I started that when I was 16 years old. I joined the local fire station, kind of out in the rural area. It was the thing to do for farmers. And did it for about 20 years. About 2008 or 9, I kind of gave it up, mainly because I just don't have enough time. And it requires a lot of continuing education because I was an EMT. To keep that going, you have hazardous materials, you name all these types of certifications you have to keep. I just couldn't get it all done. And I gave 20 years to it, or just about 20 years. And I said, you know what? I've had enough. I can still, if you need me, call me, but I'm going to hang up my coat for a while. It broadened my horizon on things, especially, one thing, if you look at my resume, I've had a lot of experience with is crisis management. Everything from, running lights and siren to a scene, trying to figure out how to triage and handle incident management, to, flying in the military, all the way down to I was a crisis manager at the National Security Agency at Cyber Command. That was kind of the seed that helped me get there of learning how to handle crisis and events of high emotion. So it's been beneficial.
I'm really glad I asked. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And you're up.
Seems like they prepared you well for the General Assembly, right?
Yeah.
It did. And it also, it drives my wife crazy sometimes because I don't get upset about things, because I'll just kind of sit back and watch, because, I've had that the careers in my life where you can't get upset, you can't overreact, you have to, watch the situation. And that happens in Annapolis, where people will get very upset because a bill might have, it got special ordered, and all of a sudden they're getting upset that, they're trying to kill their bill, they're going up to their legislation. I'm like, just take a deep breath, we'll get through it. And it has been very beneficial in not overreacting in Annapolis.
I can imagine. What initially prompted you to run for office, and what was it like to campaign?
So what got me into it was I came from an agricultural background, and a lot of times farmers in the environmental world were always, the term we'll use is the low-hanging fruit. When it came to trying to do stuff to clean up the environment, they'd always point to the farmers and say, oh, they're the problem, let's go after them. And if you remember, back in the late 90s, we had an issue in the Chesapeake Bay called Pfiesteria. It was a biological, it was some type of, it was killing fish. It was a Pfiesteria. And it turned out it did come from the ag community with manure, with chicken litter on the Eastern Shore. So the state stepped up and said, hey, let's figure this out. And they came up with something called nutrient management plans, which were definitely needed and a good idea. But sometimes they took it too far on the farmers. And, you know, being in the farm community, I saw it and I said, hey, I want to be the voice for the farmer to kind of help them say, hey, let's look at other people, let's look at other options, see what else we can do. And that's what started it in 2002. Was the both the governor, you know, because in Maryland, all the state offices run at the same time. So 2002 was the election. I decided, talked to my fiance at the time and said, what do you think? She said it was a good idea. I talked to my father, who I thought would talk me out of it. And he said, he gave me a thumbs up. And I said, let's do it. Started campaigning, and the rest is history. What do I think about campaigning is it's exciting. Think of it's truly it's like a competition. It's like being in a sports event where you're just it's almost like running a marathon. It's every day you're going, you're shaking hands, you're meeting people, you're raising money, you're getting your message out, all to kind of where the finish line is, what election day is, and to get there. I loved it. In fact, after the election, as excited as we were, many of my friends and I were all let down because there's nothing else to do. There's no campaigning anymore. Now we have to govern, and it didn't have the excitement that the nonstop action of campaigning had.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Having represented District 7 in the Maryland General Assembly as a delegate, and was from 2003 to 2011, and now as a state senator since 2011, could you tell our students what it's like to serve in the General Assembly generally, but also talk maybe about the differences in the two bodies?
Sure. So first of all, getting elected, it's an honor, knowing that you are the person who's representing your constituency. You're the voice for about 130,000 people. It's an honor that you have to accept, and you have to understand what your role is. Maryland, just like 49 other states, has a bicameral legislature, meaning a two-chambered. Only one state doesn't. That's Nebraska. They're just a body at large. And all of them have either the House of Delegates or the House of Representatives, and the other chamber is called the Senate. The difference between them, each kind of serves their own role. It's kind of, look at how Congress was set up on the federal level. The House of Representatives is based off of population of each state. California has, I think it's either 56 or 54 members, whereas Maryland has 8. And a state like Wyoming has 1. But when it comes to the Senate, every state's equal. California has 2, Maryland has 2, Rhode Island has 2. And that's kind of how the way this Maryland legislature was set up. The House is more, they call it the People's House. So there's 3 members per district. So there's 47 districts in the state. So there's 141 members. And the way I can put it is, it's kind of like it's a team sport in the House. It's like being on a football team or a baseball team. You're relying on your friends, your seatmates, your coworkers to help you with legislation. The committee is usually made up of 22 to 23 people. Actually, it would be 23 because you got to have an odd number. So it would be either 23 or 25. But it is a team sport where you work together. The Senate, it's more like golf. You're out there by yourself. There's only 47 of us, 1 per district. So you are the person who's fighting for the district. Carries a little more responsibility with regards to, we handle what's called executive nominations. So anybody the governor puts up, a judge, cabinet secretaries, any appointments come through the Senate. We have to confirm them. We interview them, have hearings, and then with an ultimate confirmation vote and hearing. But that's really kind of, it's lonelier in the Senate, I'll tell you that, compared to the House. The House, you sit closer to each other, you hang out, you go to lunch as a group. Whereas the Senate, it's more of, you're kind of on your own, but you do have the ability to get a little more done because of the role that you play. You get a little more attention when it comes to meeting with people, working with the administration, because, there's only 47 senators. So, with legislation and stuff, people, there's less members for them to meet with. So you tend to get a little more focus. You're on mute.
Unmute. Sorry about that. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. Just a follow up. Could you tell us a little bit about District 7, and then, things like current committee assignments and the role of the committees?
Sure.
And maybe a little bit more about that.
So District 7 is it's Eastern Baltimore County. So I have basically from Middle River, the Chesapeake Bay, all the way up. I used to have all the way up to the Pennsylvania line, but with redistricting, they pulled it back. So I go up to about the Jacksonville area, Phoenix. And then for Harford County, so I have basically taken the Gunpowder River that separates Baltimore and Harford County. That's my district. On Harford County, I have from the Chesapeake Bay up to the Pennsylvania line. So I have both sides of the county. Committee wise, I've served on numerous committees. The way it works in the legislature is there's one committee per member. So in the Senate, there's 4 standing committees. And I'm sorry, we just changed the Senate president just changed it because we had a new Senate president. It used to be the Education, Health, Environment, the Finance Committee, Judicial Proceedings, and Budget and Tax. But I think Education, Health, Environment's now been to Education, Energy, and the Environment, I believe. In the House, there's 6 standing committees, and again, each member serves on one, and that is the jurisdiction that you look at. So every piece of legislation that is introduced, they look at it, they determine, and this is the administrative side. They say, what is the subject matter of this piece of legislation? Is it a tax bill? Is it a funding bill? Is it a criminal law bill? And they'll direct it to whichever committee it goes to. So I now serve on the Budget and Tax Committee, which means we vote on tax bills as well as the state budget. So it's a different. I came from more policy committees like finance, where we dealt with everything from energy policy to gaming to most recently we dealt with marijuana. In the finance or the budget and tax committee, you're dealing with the actual state numbers. We have agencies come before us. A $60 billion state budget. They have to bring it to us. They have to explain why they need the money, how much they need, what the difference is from last year to this year. And then we as a committee have to vote and say, yes, we approve that spending or no. And, we tweak the governor's budget. And that's the role I play now in that committee. It's interesting. It's eye-opening. And I'm glad I'm there. I've spent most of my tenure, like I said, on the finance committee or the Education, Health, and Environment Committee, but now it's good to be on the B&T Committee.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate it, Ann.
It kind of related to that. 2 questions. One, how's your experience and all the other aspects of your life? How do you bring that into your work in the legislature, especially your work as a firefighter, a guardsman, a farmer, a business person, cyber intelligence professional?
So that's the one thing that I hear from people all the time, especially young people that want to get into public ops, that want to run. They're like, I don't have a degree in public policy, or, I didn't major in that. So that doesn't matter. The legislature is about life experiences. We deal with everything from, we'll have a bill that deals with the death penalty to, agricultural bills, to everything you can think of in our life comes before the legislature. And each person, there's 188 members, 47 in the Senate, 141 in the House. Everyone has different experiences, and people become their own SMEs, subject matter experts on stuff. For instance, me, I'm one of the guys that knows the most about agriculture, farming issues. Being in the military, I know a lot of military issues. Aviation, I'm a pilot, so people kind of look at me and say, hey, can you explain this to me? We had a bill that dealt with noise abatement procedures at BWI Airport, and nobody understood how it works, approaching the BWI. So, I sat there one day, we sat down between committee hearings, and I kind of explained, hey, here's how it works. Same thing with, we have a lot of medical issues that we deal with. Everything you can think of in the medical world. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nurse, but I do have colleagues. One of my good friends in the House was Dan Morheim, Delegate Dan Morheim. He was an emergency room physician. And there were times where I'd turn to him and be like, Dan, can you explain this? I don't understand. Why are we doing this? And he would give you his input and let you know. And that's the best thing about the legislature is no matter what your background is, you have done something that will add to the conversation in the debate of what's going on. So that's why, because people always say, well, I didn't major in it, or I didn't study that in college. It doesn't matter. There's a lot of members that don't have college degrees. They have life experience, and that's what it takes. And I'll give you a quick story about, if you have the time. I used to serve on the Judiciary Committee in the House, which is basically criminal law and law. I'm not an attorney, but the committee was made up 90% of attorneys. We had a bill once that dealt with AEDs, automatic defibrillation devices. And they were talking about having them at pools and the liability. And here I am sitting and listening to these attorneys debate this when we're kind of voting on it, about the liability of the patient that got used on. And I finally had to raise my hand and say, it's not about the patient. Let's be honest. It's an AED. If it's being used on that patient, unfortunately, they're already dead. We're trying to bring them back. So there's nothing more you can do to them because they're dead. The issue is that person that you just pulled out of a pool that unfortunately had drowned, that you put that on, they're wet. There's water now all over the concrete. People are standing there watching. And when that person hits the charge to shock that person, that shock thing travels through the water, shocks somebody, they fall, they hit their head. That's where the liability is. And you could see all of them kind of look at each other like, you know what, he's right. And it was life experience of me being an EMT, knowing how that system works, knowing what would happen, that they just didn't think that way. So
That's an interesting example.
yeah,
Absolutely. It's really cool. Thank you so much. Next question is, this is a great one, I think. As someone with significant experience in working across the aisle to address issues of the state, what lessons can you share with students about how to work with people from differing viewpoints?
when I was first elected, I was that young guy that just didn't care. My opinion was it. I didn't want to hear what you said. Don't talk to me because we're going to go this way because this is the right way. You get older, you get experience in life. And the big thing is you got to learn how to listen to the other side, understand their issue, their point of view. And, as I said, what got me into politics was farming. And in the beginning, I'd fight with the environmentalist on farming issues because all they wanted to do is shut us down. And it wasn't until I got a little older and I'd listen to them where I'd kind of realize, okay, now I understand where they're coming from. I see what they're saying. And you have to be willing to just shut up and listen to the other side. Everybody always wants to talk. If you and I are having a debate, the minute you say something I disagree with, instead of me listening to you finish it, I'll be like, no. Listen to my point of view. And we go back and forth and we just talk over each other instead of talking to each other. And the advice I have is stop talking for once. Just listen. Wait for that person to stop. When you have that awkward pause, then you say something. And it gives you a chance to listen to their point of view and say, hey, I understand where you're coming from. I really do. And, a lot of times what I will do is I will rephrase what somebody tells me. When they come at me with a question or, if we're in a kind of let's say we're debating an issue and I'll take what they said, I'll reframe it in my mind and I'll ask that question back and say, is that what you're saying? That way I understand it more. And it gives me a different perspective of how I'm going to debate them, how I'm going to take the argument. And there have been times where, you know what? I was dead set that nothing was going to change my mind. But as I've gotten older and I listen to people, my mind has been changed numerous times now where I'm like, you know what? I can see your point. I understand that. How about if we do this? And it's kind of coming into a compromise motion where you have to learn how to compromise too and not say it's all or nothing. It's, hey, you know what? I understand, let's say I because the B&T committee, we deal with finances. Let's say you want 10%, I want 5%. You know what? What if we agree on 7.5? Can we get there? And if we can't, how close can we get there? And that's what you really need to do in life is learn how to A, listen to the other side completely, and B, be willing to compromise.
Thanks so much.
Kind of on a related question, what's it like leading in the minority party during a session, and how does the minority party get its initiatives through the majority?
So in Maryland, it's tough because it's not close. In the Senate, it's simple majority is 24 votes. So anything we do, you got to have 24 votes. I only had 13 members when I was minority leader. So no matter what I did, I was only, I was 9 votes away from whatever I needed. Or I'm sorry, 11 votes. My math's off today. So it was tough. And that's when you have to learn. And that was part of my maturing as a legislator, learning how to listen to the other side and their debate and being able to say, okay, I understand where you're going with this, but let's talk about how it's going to impact this part of society that you're not thinking about. Annapolis, unlike DC, is truly made up of relationships. Politics nowadays, people won't take pictures with each other because they're afraid it's going to show up on social media. A Democrat and a Republican, you won't see them putting arm around each other getting a picture in Congress because it's going to show up on social media. It'll be all over the news that how dare this person talk with his arch enemy. Annapolis, we're not like that. We really do get along. We debate the issue. You fight on what you believe in, but once the debate's over, we shake hands and we come back to kind of. In former Speaker Taylor, who passed away last year, you always used to always say one Maryland, and that's what we always say is, look, we're one Maryland. Let's debate it. Once it's over, shake hands and come back together. And that's really that's how Annapolis works, and that's how you is the minority party. You have to be that way. As I always say, you have the bell curve where you've got the outliers that they're not willing to negotiate. Those people don't get anything done. As the minority party, when I was the leader, Mike Miller, President Miller was still around, and he did a lot to allow me to talk with him and work with him, and he was great at that, being able to open the door and say, Mike, and I use the term Mike because we were friends, but President Miller, what do you think about this? Here's why we should do that. And there were times where I could get him to our side and he'd be willing to compromise. Unfortunately, there are times where no matter what we do, we're not getting anywhere. We're going to get shut down on every vote. That's just the way it is. It's simple metrics. We don't have the votes, but it's building relationships with people, being able to talk to them, negotiate with them, and compromise with them is what you have to do in the minority party.
Thank you. A lesson for our national leaders, right?
Absolutely. Thank you. At the age of 34, you made the decision to join the Air National Guard. What was the impetus for this decision? And of course, in Maryland, there are 13 military installations within our borders. How have your views regarding the military in Maryland maybe changed or been related to your own service?
So when I was at UB, my goal upon graduation, I always wanted to go in the Navy and fly. I grew up in the 80s when Top Gun was out. I wanted to fly F-14s in the Navy. And, my senior year while I was working for Ehrlich, I took the let's see, I forgot what the test is the officers have to take. For enlisted, it's ASVAB, but for the officers, officer candidacy, I forgot what it was called. But anyway, I took it. This was 25 years ago. And, I put my package in to be a pilot. And unfortunately, at that time, it was pretty competitive. And I didn't make it on the first round. So that's when I kind of got into business and, lost focus on the military and decided I was in the business world. It was when I was in my mid-30s that I knew I had you hear the term biological clock. I had one because in the military, you had to enlist in the Air Force by the age of 35. So, I decided to do it and met with a recruiter. And fortunately, I'd gained a lot of weight by then. So I had to lose all this weight. And I did it. I took the ASVAB test and they pulled my officer candidacy test from when I took it years before. And I didn't want to go active duty. I want to go in the reserve. So I talked to the reserve components as well as the Air National Guard, which is a reserve component of the Air Force. And I met with the Navy and I just decided for me, the best spot was the Air National Guard, which again is the reserve component of the Air Force, one of the two. And at the age of 34, I shipped off to basic training, went to boot camp, and I did that for about 3 months of basic training, and then about another 6 months of tech school, doing my job, which was a loadmaster on C-130s, and don't regret it 1 minute. The only regret I have is I didn't do it when I was younger, and that has really opened my eyes. I strongly encourage anybody who's young, join the reserves. I'm telling you, it will definitely help you in life, and it will expand your horizon and your view on things. It's one of the best things you can do, and especially somebody who's at UB, you're going to be graduating soon. You can go in as an officer. But that was why I did it. I always wanted to serve, and I waited till the last minute. I had the option, and then I pulled the trigger and did it. And I've been in there now since 2008.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate it. Ann?
Has that experience led to any policies or laws that you supported or provided input on? It seems like you're in a unique position with.
It has. It everything you do gives you a different perspective, and for the military side, it does. You know, you talked about all the installations we have on the state. You know, the one that you look at is, you got you got Aberdeen Proving Grounds, you got Andrews Air Force Base, Fort Meade, Pax River, and then Fort Dietrich out in Frederick. Those are the big ones you think of. And then you have the smaller ancillary bases for National Guard and Air National Guard, as well as some reserve offices. It just gives you a different way of looking at things when bills come up, especially like we've had some issues with I'm trying to think of the term to put it, professional licensing. Let's say that you are a nurse in Michigan and your spouse transfers to Fort Meade to work, so you pick up the family and move here. Well, you got to go through the licensing board here in Maryland to continue your job as a nurse. And, seeing, a lot of friends and families who've moved now that I serve with saying, that's not right. If you've got that license in Michigan, we need to come up with some way of making it a little easier. So we've had several pieces of legislation where we have done that, where if you've got a certificate, a license from another state, you've moved here in military, instead of having to go through the whole licensing board that you would normally have to, we've been able to kind of truncate that and make it a little easier, while still ensuring that everybody has the requirements they need to have that license. But with military, it's kind of, it allows them to kind of sometimes jump in front of the line on some of these. And there's a lot to it. I don't want you to think we're cutting off anybody else who's going to move into the state, but it's things like that you understand, you see how it affects them and their lives. So, yeah, I'm sorry. In a minute, my daughter's about to walk in. I just saw her come home from school and she's excited because she got sweatpants. She got a new outfit for school. So welcome to my daughter, Kate.
Hi,
Good. Come here and say hi. All right. She's too shy.
awesome.
Well, we say hello.
Hi.
Yeah, as soon as she saw that I was on camera, she got nervous and ran out.
Ann, do you have a follow-up, or do you want me to go to the next one? It's up to you.
Actually, my next question has to do about your experiences with agriculture and how your role as a senator. So you talked about that a little bit. What do you think the future is of farming, though, and farming security? What we need to do to ensure food security?
So farming is becoming I hate to use, I don't want to use this term. They use it, factory farming, but it's becoming more corporate based. If you think about 50 years ago, the farmer had a big family. He had a couple sons that, they got into farming. They worked there as kids through high school, middle school, into college. They graduated college, they came back, worked on the farm, and they took the farm over. Around here, that's changing. Not too many people want to pursue that lifestyle. So they're becoming more of a corporate structure. A dairy farm requires you milking those cows twice a day, every day, no matter what, 365 days a year, Christmas, holidays, snow, rain, sleet, you got to milk those cows. And it's a tough lifestyle. And, families don't get to go to vacations at times because they're busy with, the farms. So what's happening is you're seeing farms are becoming larger in size, as in, more of a corporate structure where they actually have employees and not family members running the farm. And you have your regular shift that you work or your schedule. So you get your time off, your vacations. And that's kind of where I think we are headed as a nation. You're seeing it all over the place, especially as you go further west. and some of these bigger operations. Same thing around here. And I think in another 20 years, that's what you're going to see are these larger operations. And it's going to be economy of scale. Because especially around here, the price of land is extremely expensive. And unless you currently own that farm to buy land, there's no way you can compete with the developers. If let's say there's 100 acres that comes for sale, there's no way a farmer making, whether he's going to grow corn, soybeans, cattle, he can't compete with somebody who's going to take that land and put 30 houses on it. They can pay 3 times as much as the farmer. And, that's what the landowner is going to do. And I understand it. So the only way to do that is you got to be able to, have much larger size farms that have income that, have the ability to buy product and land at higher costs. So that's unfortunate to see where we're going. Not that it's a bad thing, it's also going to be efficiency, and it will, I talked earlier about the environment, in a structure like that, it's easier to have, eyes on the operation, and it's good and bad, but we're moving in a good area, I think, a good direction with it. So.
Thank you.
That is
Roger?
that is really super interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way, honestly. And we've also been hearing, and Anne had provided some statistics about this, that the average age of a farmer is going up, although the average age of most employees are going up, I would say, and leaders too. But to what extent does that hold any concerns for you about the future of farming for young people?
It does some, because our younger generations, they don't want to go into the office anymore. They want to work remote. Everybody's looking for an easier lifestyle, and farming is not it. You got to be out in it. It's going to be that corporate mentality is the only way it's going to survive, where you can actually hire people to work shifts. It's just the nature of the beast, and where that world is going. But also technology is improving it. If you think of the way a lot of things working, when you look at a combine nowadays, there's more electronics in that combine than you can imagine, the computerization in them. And because of that, we're getting efficient with planting, and the amount of fertilizer that gets spread, and down to the actual plot of land. It knows exactly how much phosphorus, potash, nitrogen to put out. Before you spread it all the same amount all over the field. Now you're down to, the computers are reading it, telling you exactly how much to put out. So it's efficiency, and it's you're replacing that worker that, let's say, you used to have 3 or 4 people out there running a combine. Now it's 1 person because of efficiency. Well, yeah, you've replaced those 3 other guys on the other combines, but guess what? They're also now computer programmers who are programming the computers in that combine, or developing the technology to run the GPS in that combine. So it's ag's still building. It's not as many people in the field, with boots, mud on their boots, with the crops, as they are more on the technological side of improving the technology to, develop systems to pick the crops, or you name it. Even milking cows is becoming automated now.
Yeah, thanks. That's really, really super interesting. And already we're starting to get some questions in the chat, and one related to that too. We have a few more, and then we'll maybe hit the chat, not the chat, but the Q&A. But I wanted to remind everyone who's here, and thank you so much for coming, everyone. If you have questions for the senator, go ahead and put them in the Q&A function at the bottom of the Zoom screen, and then we can get to some of those, maybe all of those if we have time, as as we move forward. But Ann and I always try to provide some opportunities for our guests to answer some questions about, in some ways, development of people, development of our students. And so one was, what role have mentors played in your life, Senator? And for our students who are seeking mentors, what advice would you have on how to identify and work with one?
As in, they're looking for a mentor or they want to mentor somebody?
Yeah.
They're looking for one right now.
So
Sorry, yeah.
the number one thing is don't be afraid to ask somebody.
Mhm.
A lot of people, they never ask me for my opinion or, hey, can you help me? Can you give me advice? Ironically, we talked earlier about my military career. If I would have had one person who would have sat down with me for 5 minutes and explained how the military worked before I got in there, I would have been on a different path, a different trajectory. But nobody sat with me and told me that because A, I was too afraid to ask. B, nobody was willing to do that. It really comes down to, my daughter's back. Don't be afraid. If you know somebody that you respect them, you see what they do in life, whether it's career or something they do, reach out to them and say, hey, you know what? I really would like your opinion on this. Would you mind meeting with me for a cup of coffee and helping me and mentoring me on doing what I want to do? It's very, when somebody does that to me, I'm absolutely, absolutely, you're excited that somebody's, respects you that much that wants it. And that's the number one thing is don't be afraid to ask. I really doubt somebody's gonna be like, no, leave me alone. I'm pretty sure they'll say to you, sure, you know what? I'd love to talk to you and explain it to you. Even some curmudgeons I know that I've talked to over the years, um, who I didn't think would ever say yes, have said, yeah, I'll meet with you. And they might not give me all the time they want, but at least they're willing to sit down. And that's the number one thing when it comes to a mentor is find somebody that you respect, that you want to, and I don't, everybody idolizes somebody or I want to be that person. Look, you want to live your own life. You want to be your own person. You might like things they've done, but your course will not be the same as theirs. Nobody takes the same path, but at least they'll give you the opinions and the suggestions. Like if somebody were to call me right now and say, hey, I want to get into politics. What do you think? I'll spend 2 hours explaining what my thoughts, what could help them. And they may go a different way, or they might not. Oh, sorry, hold on. Say hi, Kate. All right.
Hi.
All right. So that's my opinion on that when it comes to mentors.
Thanks very much. One real quick plug for our students in attendance. The university in the division that we call Student Success and Student Support has an amazing mentor program, and just wanted to encourage students to sign up for a mentor. We have a great program where we align students with mentors in our university. So if you didn't know about that, everyone, please reach out and we'll put a link in the chat if we can find it. And thank you, Senator. Really appreciate it.
And one other, I will, a company I did work for, they did an incredible mentorship program where every summer students would go in and spend their summer working for that company, kind of an internship. And they did it their sophomore, junior, senior year. Even though I think they did it freshman, so it was 4 years. So by the idea is when they graduate college, A, they have a job, but B, they already know the company. They've been there theoretically for 4 years. Sorry, things are getting. Tell your mother I'm on the phone. Life's hitting me now. Here I am at home, so now I got my wife calling. I got my daughter answering the phone. But reach out to companies and talk to them. They're always companies need workforce. They need help, and to have somebody reach out and say, hey, I don't want a job. I want to come either intern for you or your company I'd like to work for when I get out of college. But in the meantime, can I meet with you? Can I find a mentor in the organization to work with me? I'm pretty sure you'll get a positive response.
Thank you. When you were at UB, did you participate in any campus activities that influenced the way you pursued your career in public service, or advice you have for students who are interested in public service?
Yeah, I did the student senate. So I was on the senator in the student senate for a while. Then we had I did various things. I was active as I could be, but as we mentioned earlier, UB is more of a professional school where you have a lot of people that are working, so you don't have the downtime that somebody that might be at a traditional, went away to college where they're living on campus. They don't have that time. They have a lot of time that they can get involved. Um, I spent more time. What I did try to do was at the time, because they had just built the Merrick School, the building, and we had several events where we tried to get speakers to come in and use the center atrium area and highlight that. And but the student government was where I spent most of my time on campus helping out.
And related to that, what advice do you have for students who might be considering a career in public service?
Public service is broad. It's not just the elected official, but if that's where you want to go, by all means, go for it. There's a lot of positions as well as, staffers working for the elected official, being policy analyst or constituent services, but it's also on the other side of the equation being the advocates, being a lobbyist. And lobbyist isn't necessarily a bad word. Some people think it is, but a lobbyist is somebody who advocates for a position. There's something you might like, you really love, you just that is passionate toward you or for you. Come to Annapolis. You could testify. Session starts the second Wednesday of January. So what's that? Almost a month and a week away, 6 weeks away. Anybody can testify on legislation. You just have to sign up and, go through the website, the Maryland General Assembly website, read it. And I guarantee you there's going to be legislation that every one of the people watching this video, something will intrigue them and say, that's interesting, or I agree, or I totally disagree. You know what? You got to communicate. You got to email us, write us. Best thing you can do, come down and testify. Since COVID, we have allowed virtual testimony. Before you couldn't, before it was always in person, but we do allow a certain amount of speakers for every bill to testify via remote. But, you get 2 to 3 minutes to come down, state your case and make your point be heard. That I strongly encourage that. Again, if you want to run for office, go for it. It's a lot of work. I'll tell you that. It's a lot of commitment running, but reach out to me. I'll tell you, even if you're on the other side of the aisle, I'll be more than happy to give you pointers and do anything I can to help you, because that's what you need is people who are passionate, willing to come to put themselves out there to talk and give you their points. Most people nowadays, unfortunately, with social media and other things, nobody calls each other anymore. Everybody just texts, and we've lost that personal contact. And people who are willing to actually do that, to kind of come out from their house and come to Annapolis or actually call me or meet with me one-on-one, I'm all for. And if you want to be effective, that's what you need to do. Kind of went off a tangent there, but
Thank you. I appreciate that. And for those of you who don't know, the Maryland General Assembly website is actually really great. It's well organized and very easy to find the issues that you're interested in.
Thank you. That wasn't a tangent at all. It was really useful. Appreciated. Yeah, just a couple more. This last one, sometimes this would get posed by a journalist and it might put a person on guard. So hopefully this isn't how you feel, but your career spans volunteer, military, and elected office. What's next for you in the future?
I don't know. This is my next life right here. These are my kids. Thank you. I'm answering a question. Go on. I would have told you 10 years ago, my goal is to, run for Congress or county executive or something else. I don't know. Now it's about my life, my kids and my family. We talked about things that changed my life, being in the military, having, agricultural background, being in the fire department. What changed me as a person was having 2 children. It made me look at things differently. You know, I used to be that guy that you go to a restaurant, you hear a crying baby. I'd be like, oh my gosh, there's a crying baby. Why are they here? Get them out of here. You know, then I was that guy that had the crying baby, and I understand and I see it, and it changed my perspective on life. And now when I see a baby crying, you know, I actually get a smile on my face. I'm like, oh, can I see him? Can I, hold him? Let me see if I can help you stop. And that's what my future is. I don't know. It's uncharted. It's unwritten. I may do this another 3 years, another 8 years. Who knows? I may run for governor. I may run for Congress. I don't know. Or you know what? I can hang it up and say, I've done enough. I'm ready to go home and get more time with my family. And and when people say that, and I will say this, you hear all the time where a politician finally retires, and their reasoning is they want to spend more time with their family. Here's why they say that is we have functions we have to go to all the time. Every night there's a ribbon cutting, there's a bull and oyster roast, there's a town hall meeting, constituent meeting. It's nonstop. So when you do run in political office, you do give up a lot of your free time in the evenings, in the weekends, to go to functions. And because of that, your family is the one who pays the price. So when you hear somebody say, I'm done, I want to spend more time with my family, that's truly what it is they want to be able to spend the entire weekend with them and not have to leave at 3 o'clock in the afternoon to go to an Eagle Scout event, followed up by a ribbon cutting, and then be back at 8 o'clock that night. So that's all I got on that one.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciated. And yeah, that kind of hidden part of public service, wow, absolutely real. And thank you for mentioning that. And you want to start now going into the Q&A questions? It looks like we have about 4 of them.
Sure. Senator, you touched on this a little bit when you're talking about lobbyists. This question is from Joe Adler. What's your opinion of the role and influence of lobbyists on the legislative process in Annapolis?
One of my favorite questions. So you got to understand there's different types of lobbyists. You have what's called a contract lobbyist, who is somebody that they work for a firm, either a law firm or just regular lobbying firm, who they get hired by people to lobby their view. So let's say this year they get hired by Uber to push their view of why Uber's so great. That's who they're going to lobby for. Well, next year, the taxi cab companies who hate Uber hire the lobbyists. Well, guess what? Next year, they're lobbying for the taxi cab companies. And you're like, which one do you really believe in? So that's how a contract lobbyist works. And you have to remember that they're being paid to push their view for that particular client. You also have what I call industry lobbyists who, they work for one organization, whether it be, UMB or UB or the electric companies, BGE, that, that's their sole client. That's who they work for. Those people, I listen to them a little more because, that's all they represent. That's who they work for. Versus the contract lobbyist, you listen to them, you kind of hold them back, arm's length distance, because they're being paid by somebody to push that view on you. Don't get me wrong, they bring a lot of information at times. They can help formulate opinions, because there's times where you're like, I just need more information. I don't fully understand this, or I don't understand why we're going this way. Help me. Lobbyists are people that they're pushing a view, and that's how you as a legislator have to remember that you're listening to them. You're not taking their advice. You're just listening to what they're saying, and then you have to make a decision on your own. And unfortunately, some people, they get too tied up with lobbyists. They're like, oh, well, what he said is gospel, so I got to go that way. I'm like, no, I understand. I'm going to formulate my own opinion. You get as much information as you can, and you formulate your own opinion. And when it comes to lobbyists, you just have to realize who they work for, who's paying them, and keep that in the back of your mind.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. And thanks to Professor Adler for that question. One of our students asks, and thank you, Rebecca, With the news release of the budget deficit in our state, how do you foresee this impacting your ability to secure funding to support your constituents and maybe for other things for that matter?
Yeah. So the budget actually it's bad, but it's not dire right now. There's a term we use, structural deficit, and it's the outer years. Right now, in 24, 23, 24, 25, it's bad, but with some tweaking of the budget, we'll be able to fix it without really going too deep. It's the outer years once you get into 2027, 28, 29, where we really go into the hundreds of millions of dollars to billions of dollars where we're actually in a structural deficit. And it's been several pieces of legislation that have caused that. One is the Kerwin Commission, which push money towards education. And the formulas in Kerwin, they keep rising. They have these inflators in them, and it's costing us more and more money to the point where it's almost taking us bankrupt as a state. So we're gonna have to go back and reevaluate those. Look, I voted for Kerwin. It was not a popular thing to do for my party, but I thought it was the right thing for education and for kids. But I'm willing to admit that, hey, you know what? Now that we've had a couple years to look at it, it's been about 4 years. You know what? That formula it needs to be tweaked. And the one thing that's great about our government is we can change it. The laws, people all the time say, oh, we're stuck with that. No, we pass bills now that, will change a couple days, couple years later. And that's what we're gonna have to do is go in and look at that and say, you know what, let's change that formula because it's too much. I understand what we wanted to do back in 2018, 2019, but we can't afford that. So for us to get the state in a better position, we have to change that formula. Now, people are going to say, well, you're taking money from education. We are, but then again, we are not. We give a lot of money to education. We've improved things. You have to look at it and dive deeper into it. When it comes to bringing money back for the constituency, it's, taxpayers want to make sure that the roads are paved, they're plowed when it snows, that when they call 911, that the police or the fire department shows up. That's the vital services that they want, that we have to make sure we provide. And everybody in this state has a right constitutionally to a free and public education. And with that, we have to make sure we have the best schools we can. I think we do. And I'll be honest with you, I put a lot of the education problems back on the parents. I mean, here I am a parent myself. And I see where, I love my parents to death, but when I came home from school, they never made me do my homework. They're like, you have homework? No. Oh, okay. I was out playing with my friends. I think sometimes you got to push parents need to push a little harder for their kids, making sure that, they're getting everything they need and be better advocates for them. We put too much responsibility on the teacher's back. They only have the kid for 6 hours a day, the student for 6 hours a day. So I just, I don't want people thinking that I'm saying we're going to cut education, but I'm saying let's look at it because we cannot move forward with this formula the way it is. Because otherwise, here's the only options you have in government when it comes to raising to fund the budget. You can either cut money or raise money. Raise money is taxes. People don't want their taxes raised. We pay a lot of money in this state. You go to other states, such as Delaware, where you don't have a sales tax. You go to Florida where you don't have a retirement tax. There's advantages in other states, and that's why you have these exodus of people who go to those states to live because it's cheaper or less burdensome on their pocketbook and their wallet. And that's how we have to be in this state, but be wiser in the way we're doing it. So.
Thanks so much. Really appreciated.
So going back to farming, this is from Heather White Nicole, one of our faculty members. She said, you make an excellent point regarding the cost of land and disadvantage of farmers. She lives in District 8. Oops.
Oh, whoops.
I got
Apologies. I remember it.
So she lives in District 8, where there's a lot of overdevelopment, where former family farms have been developed. What can be done to curb future development in other areas? And because this is also leading to strained infrastructure and overcrowding in school.
Well, District 8 is home to Perry Hall, which, 40 years ago, Perry Hall was nothing but farms. Look at where White Marsh Mall is, and now it is Townhome City. Uh, what can change or what can be done? First of all, the state has several programs in place that help curb development with regards to the farmer. Example is um, Rural Legacy, MALF, which is Maryland Ag Land Preservation Fund. So what they do, these are programs that when you sell a house, the transfer tax, there's a little bit of that money that goes into a pot of money that then can be given to the farmers, where what it does is, let's say that you have a 100-acre farm. We're just going to use round numbers. I know these numbers aren't exact, but we'll just use them to make my point. And let's say a 100-acre farm, you want to sell it at $10,000 an acre. That $1 million farm, a farmer can't afford. And that's what the value is today to a developer, $10,000 an acre. So what they'll do is they'll sell the development rights off and say, hey, there's 30 development rights, and that farm's probably worth $5,000 an acre, but with development rights, it's worth $10,000 an acre. Well, the farmer gets paid the difference. So they're made whole while they still have the farm, so that in the future, should they sell their farm, they're going to sell it at a discount, but they've taken the money today to buy off those development rights. So that's the number one program that's out there that we work hard to fund, to make sure that we can buy up these development rights. The other one comes down to the zoning. Everybody wants the term, we use McMansions, a beautiful colonial home on a 10-acre parcel with no neighbors close to them. Well, guess what? That 10 acres on a 100-acre farm is only 10 houses. Versus, you know what? Maybe we should put in more condensed housing, like townhouses, or put smaller lots. You can put more houses there. That's where zoning gets, the county council members have to look at it and prioritize their zoning. The other thing they've done is you have these what are called ERDL lines, where they're not going to bring sewer or municipal water out to an area. So for instance, Jacksonville, they will not bring municipal water up there. So the only way to have development is either a well or a septic system. So you don't have as much development. There's things like that you can do. Unfortunately, we are at the point where the land around here is just, it's being gobbled up by developers. We're kind of late to the program on some of these farms, but around me, a couple of the farms, they have sold off their development rights. So fortunately, they can't be developed. And it's programs like that we have to do, as well as make farming viable for the farmers, make it so that they can have an honest living. And the term they use now is agritainment, where they've gotten away from necessarily just raising corn, where now all of a sudden they have a corn maze in the fall, where you're paying $5 per kid to go through a corn maze. They're making 10 times the amount of money for 1 month having people run through a corn maze than selling the actual corn. Sorry, my wife's texting me that I have to take my kid to practice soon. So it's things like that you have to do to truly make it as viable as you can for the farmer. Because as I always say, farming, it's a lifestyle, a way of life. It's not a job to a farmer. They love what they do. They love getting up at 4:30 in the morning and going out there and milking those cows, or feeding the hogs or the chickens, or plowing the fields. That's what they do because they love it. If you make it viable for them so that they can make enough money and continue doing it, they'll do it. So.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Would you like
We
to
have
close
time.
out so you can get to practice?
No, we can I see 2 more questions if you want to ask them real quick.
Okay.
Great. I think you kind of got at one of them already. I'll run to one from our student. I think it's Nicolina Mesicola. Thank you, Nicolina. First of all, complimenting your session today, and I fully agree. This has been fantastic, and thank you so much. But her question's a big one. Mike, what advice do you have for the future generation, and maybe in public service or generally, whatever you'd like to tackle?
Here's what's driving me crazy is, I mentioned earlier, is nobody's willing to talk to each other. Everybody's opinionated. It's have compassion, uh, be humble, and you don't always have to be right in life. Even though you think you're right, sometimes you don't have to actually be right. You just have to let somebody else maybe win that debate. Um, social media, again, it has wrecked politics. Everything you do nowadays, it's out there. People beat you up. The advice I give you is just, ironically, I listened to a podcast the other day. Charlie Munger, who was Warren Buffett's right-hand man, just passed away, and he was brilliant in some of the things he said. And it's worth it go and listen to some of his quotes and how he looked at life. But some of what he said was just treat others like you want to be treated, and we don't do that anymore, and it just drives me crazy. Yeah, I'm trying to wrap my brain on this because I could actually go deep into this thing because it's actually a good question. Advice, if I was in your shoes sitting back there, let's say 21, 22 years old, sitting in college, if I could talk to myself then, the number one thing I'd say is, first of all, listen to what, and here I am calling myself an elder, listen to what the elders say, because we really do have advice. We do know what we're talking about. You know, invest a little bit of your paycheck, even if you don't have money, put a little bit away, 5%, 3% every pay period. Don't ever touch it because you're going to regret it when you're 50, 60 years old that you don't have any retirement there. Just I think just I don't know, man. This is a pretty philosophical debate I'm about to go into on it. So, but the big thing is really just be humble, be willing to listen to people, listen to the other side, put yourself in their shoes. Nobody does that anymore. Understand where people are coming from. It'll help you in your work world. It'll help you in your professional world. It'll even help you in marriage. Listen to what your spouse says, even though you think they're wrong or they're yelling at you. Understand where they're coming from because people don't do that. And that is the biggest thing that I've done in the last 5 years that has changed my outlook on life and how things work. So.
Wow, thank you so much. We really, really appreciate it. On behalf of the entire university, our president, and definitely me and Ann, thank you so much for your service to the state. I think we really enjoyed hearing about your career and honestly, the inspiring words that you gave to our student. We'd love you to come back in the future. And certainly if there's anything we can do for you at the University of Baltimore, let us know. We're very proud of you. Ann?
Sure. Thank you.
Yes, I echo Roger's comments. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your time and really appreciate your willingness to be kind of open and honest with our students about your career. And it's been really a fascinating conversation. It'll also be up on our website archive. And one of our faculty members actually uses this as an assignment for students. So it's a really great opportunity for the learning to continue. And we appreciate it so much. And thank you to your daughter for her patience.
Yeah, absolutely.
She actually plays ice hockey, so I'll take her to ice hockey practice.
Super cool.
But in all sincerity, call me. If you guys have any questions and you watch this a year from now and you're like, hey, I want to talk to him, reach out to my office, 410-841-3706, 410-841-3706, or email me and say, hey, I saw you on the UB podcast or webinar. I have a question. Or even if you're looking for advice, reach out to me. I have more time. I'm in the car every morning taking kids to school. We can talk, or, I'll even schedule coffee one day if you want to do that. But, any advice, any help I can give anybody, I'm here for, because that's what we need, because we've kind of stepped away from that in life, unfortunately.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. I hate to run, but
please run. Have a great night. Thank you.
All right. See
you.
Bye.
Bye.